Hello and welcome to another Magic the Gathering video. So today I'm going to be looking at the event deck from the Dragon's Maze set. What some people may or may not know is there has been a change slightly in the way event decks are released now. Back from when we first got event decks, the original idea was there was going to be 2 event decks per set. So this was mirrored in Besiege when these first appeared. And what they've done with Dragon's Maze is they've now gone to 1 per set. Now the logic behind that is that anybody that's been aware of these event decks and has bought them will know that what you tended to find was one of the 2 decks was clearly a lot better than the other one, for a couple of reasons. One reason was often it played a hell of a lot better than the other one. The other reason was that in some decks there were some money cards and people would often buy the deck purely for those cards. Consequently, what happened was, because of that, the store owners were often left with a whole ton of the other deck that people didn't want, because in the display packs you had equal numbers of both decks. So what Wizards have done now is, as of Dragon's Maze, they have introduced just a single deck per set. So what I've decided to do from this point onwards is I'm going to try for each one to do an event deck unboxing, and consequently what I will be doing, hopefully this should work out, is for the intro decks I probably will be doing less unboxing of those, but I will be doing analysis hopefully before they come out. And the plan is to do all of them. So that's where I'm hoping to go with this. So you should get unboxings and analysis for all the event decks from now on, because there's only 1 per set. But the intro decks I'm going to be doing more of like a digital analysis, really, and not actually unboxing them. It just means that I don't have tons of products, basically. Now the other thing is just quickly explain about what is an event deck. How does it differ from an intro deck? So an intro deck is, not surprisingly, designed to give beginners an introduction to the game. It allows you to learn how Magic works, how the basic rules work, to understand interactions. The decks generally aren't tuned to their full extent, so you have a degree of variance, which means that when you play an intro deck, each time you play it, they're slightly different. To keep the cost down, often the intro deck will contain some cards which are either completely not unapplicable or suboptimal, but that the very nature of them obviously makes people want to go and buy boosters to basically modify the deck, so there's obviously a marketing reason as well. But they do provide a good introduction. With event decks, what they do is they fill a hole that really was there for a product which allowed you to go along to F&M and say an event, a game day, something like that, with a fairly strong deck that didn't need too much extra tweaking. So the event deck, this one is $25 in Canada, whereas an intro deck is going to be around about $15, and we'll see the difference when we open this, and you can see an intro deck opening I've done in the past and see what you get in that. Now that leads into my second thing, is like tweaking event decks. So the smart, cost-effective thing to do with an event deck is, once you've played it and worked out how it works and work out where maybe stuff isn't working, is to buy singles. Now obviously to do that you have to have an understanding of what's out there, so you have to use a gatherer. The other less cost effective way to do things is just simply to open boosters and just see what you get. So I'm really sort of coming from an angle where maybe this is the first product that someone's bought, and they've done that. They've thought, well, while I'm here buying the event deck, why don't I buy some boosters? So I've got 4 boosters here. So the sum total of this is going to come around to about, it's 25 for the event deck, and then depending on where you are, boosters in Canada are around about $5. can be slightly less, can be nearer to $4, but generally $5 is what you'll see. So that's 20. So we're talking about $45 here. So it's just a bit cheaper than buying a fat pack. So just to give you some idea. So what I'm going to do, open this up, explain a bit about the deck and the synergies, and then we're going to crack some boosters, because I know everybody likes booster cracking, and just see what we can pull and just hope that the luck goes for us. But like I said, it's not always the best way to tweak an event deck. It's fun, but it's not the most cost-effective way if you have a particular plan. So this is Strength of Selesnya, and this is it's difficult to tell from the top, and sometimes when people are looking at these, you know, they're trying to decide to buy them, they want to go, well, what colour combination it is. This is a green white deck, although it's not quite that straightforward, and we'll come on to that in a moment. So these contain 60 cards, it's 60 card decks, plus you get a 15 card sideboard. Now the sideboard is just generally in these decks is tuned not necessarily towards the meta game at the time this was released, but really tuned towards what type of deck is going to cause the most amount of problems for this deck in its unaltered format. So let's open this up. I'm just seeing on here, I believe this deck uses tokens. So you can see there's the Selesnya logo, whatever you want to call that. You also get a dice in here. You go with the Dragon's Maze. Dragon's Maze logo on it. It's not focusing too well because the box is in the way. There we go. Okay. So open this up. There's our sideboard. There's a divider, because the idea is once you're good to go, this box doubles up as your deck box. We have the deck itself. They also will fit in once everything's sleeved up. They do fit back into the boxes. We have a how to play guide. And that's interesting with this product, because I do get the impression with event decks that they do assume a degree of prior knowledge about Magic, but they still have the how to play guide in it. I imagine there's quite a few people coming in. Actually, event decks may be the first thing that they buy, simply because they actually know how to play Magic through another mechanism apart from paper Magic, through, say, Jewels of Planeswalker, or maybe playing online. So this is the deck description. You can see the reason why I'm bringing this up, that of course the cards aren't coming just from this particular set. You've got Innistrad, Return to Ravnica, Avacyn Restored, 2013, Dragon's Maze. So there's a lot of stuff that were actually in the previous block in here. It's like Innistrad. So something to bear in mind. So what we may find is, in terms of synergies and the particular mechanism we might see in this deck, and not all these event decks may have the mechanism that's relevant to the set they're in. That is quite possible. So we'll see what happens. There's also notes about the playing of the deck. Now, looking at this, and I'm not going to go through this in massive detail, but the deck uses a lot of populate in it, because you're playing creature tokens in here. And then the section at the bottom here, which is the other bit we'll be interested in. Let's just see what they suggest, because we're going to look out for these cards as we're cracking stuff open. It says, if you enjoy building up an unstoppable army with growing ranks and Vitu Gizu Guildmage, try adding Trosnia Selena Voice from Return to Ravnica. So Also it mentions, yeah, creatures like Loxodon Smiter and Armada Worm. So I suppose what I'm saying with this is one example where, in fact, buying the product, playing with it may be a good idea before you start investing money in other boosters or other product, because you get then an idea of what's going to work best in this deck, and then focus your buying accordingly. There's also tips for successful events in this, which is really useful. You know, that was always a problem, I think, originally with the intro packs. At one point, intro packs were like 40 cards, which was not valid for FNM, which is like 60 cards if they're playing, you know, a constructed event there. So let's open up this and get a feel for what these cards do. Okay, so what normally happens with these is when they pack them, they normally go through it with mana, increasing cost order. So this is our 1-drop creature, Doom Traveller, 1 white for a 1/1. It's from Innistrad. Now, when Doom Traveller dies, put a put a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying onto the battlefield. So we have a token coming in from this card if it dies, and there are a number of these. You have 2 of those. And we're moving on. We have Vitu Giza Ghazi Guildmage, which is green-white Guildmage, 2/2. So 4 green-white puts a 3/3 green centaur creature token onto the battlefield, and 2 green-white populates. So you can see how those 2 abilities may work together, although obviously to put the token into play, you're going to be quite a few turns into the game before you're able to do that, because you've got effectively a combined mana cost there of 6, so you've got to have 6 mana available, of which 1 has to be green and 1 has to be white, and the remaining 4 can be any colour. So obviously the other thing with this is that populate ability, which would kick in a lot sooner, can be used on any other token. So you may have other tokens in play, possibly from a dead Doomed Traveller, which can also be populated. And there are 2 of those in the deck. Champion of Lambholt, which is 1 and 2 green. It's a, I think it's difficult to see on the colour here. It looks like a rare, yeah. It's a 1/1. Creature with power less than Champion of Lambholt power can't block creatures you control. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of Lambholt. So every time creatures come into play, and this isn't just token creatures, this is actual creatures as well, so any creature, but only ones under your control, it's going to pump this permanently. So it's going to put +1/+1 counters on it, which means that's going to have an effect on that upper ability, on how that plays out, because this card's getting stronger and stronger, and so it's going to make other cards, it's going to get more cards on the other end of the table not be able to block you. Wayfaring Temple, 1 green white, also rare. And you'll notice here, like I said, is that there's lots of different sets in here. That was from Avacyn Restored. So with Wayfaring Temple, it's 1 green and white, doesn't appear to have power and toughness on it. It says star star, so we know that somewhere on the card it's going to explain us where that power and toughness comes from. So Wayfaring Temple's power and toughness are equal to the number of creatures you control, and again that's any creature you control, be it a token or a regular creature. Whenever Wayfaring Temple deals combat damage to a player, populate. So again it's going to increase the number of tokens on the battlefield. So you can see where this is going. We have a legendary in here in the form of Odric Master Tactician from the core set from M13. 2 white for a 3/4. It's got first strike on it. Whenever Odric Master Tactician and at least 3 other creatures attack, you choose which creatures block this combat and how those creatures block. Now, because you've got these tokens being generated and populate going on, there's a good chance that you are going to have at least 3 creatures to attack with. So what you're looking for in any deck like this is, do these synergies that are supposed to work, do they actually work? Do they set up an unrealistic expectation, or is that expectation achievable consistently? Geist Honoured Monk, 3 and 2 white. It's a rare, and again it's got star, so we're looking to see how this power and toughness is created. Has vigilance on it, which means this does not tap when you attack. A Geist Honoured Monk, Monk's power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control. So it's another one that's dependent on the creatures and any creatures you control. When Geist Honoured Monk enters the battlefield, put 2 +1/+1 white spirit creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield. So it's ensuring that when it comes in, it's not going to die straight away because its power and toughness is just 0/0. Because anything that has a toughness of 0 dies, unless there's another reason that would override that. Now, this is a good point with Wayfaring Temple, just to compare the two. So with this, you need to make sure with Wayfaring Temple that in actual fact, there are, you do have creatures that you control in play. Otherwise, it's going to die when it enters the battlefield. A Geist Honoured Monk, however, when it enters the battlefield, it puts 2 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield. Okay, so now I think that's the sum total of our creatures, because most of the other stuff in the deck produces creatures through a non-creature spell. So this is where all lot of the tokens come from. However, on the in the 1 mana green slot, we have Rancor, which is a very, very powerful uncommon. This is from M13. It's just reprinted in M13 after being pretty difficult, even though it's an uncommon. I think it was only original in maybe 1 set, I think, or very few sets, if that. So this is an enchantment. When you enchant the creature, it gets +2/+0 and has trample. And what I find makes this so good, this card, is a lot of enchantments, when you kill the thing they're enchanting or they're removed in some way, that's it, the enchantment is gone. What's really good about this, and I've seen this through playing Magic the Gathering online, I had it in a deck that I was developing, which was, I think, using something like Undying, and I was attaching this to an Undying creature, but then when I wanted the creature to undie, to basically pump it, this thing would bounce back into my hand because of the second ability, which is when Rancor is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return Rancor to its owner's hand. So it doesn't really matter how it's got into the graveyard. It could have gone in there because the whatever it was attached to has died or been removed in some way, or it got removed itself by a spell that put it into the graveyard. Now, do remember that one way this will not come back is if this gets exiled by some card, or if this gets locked down in some way and it never gets near the graveyard. Now, there's 2 of those. Wait the Reflections is 1 white, and all it does is basically just populate. So you wouldn't want to play this until you had something to populate, i.e. a token, and you had enough. And this is the other thing about this deck I've noticed, is that timing is so important with this to get the maximum benefit of out of some of these cards. With a cost of 1 white, it's really tempting to play this card early on because you can. However, what that 1 white gives you is also flexibility, in that it doesn't cost much to cast. So you could save it until a point in the game where playing it would be much more effective. Not surprisingly, there's a full playset of these in here. We've got Intangible Virtue, which is 1 and a white. This is an enchantment, but it's a global enchant. Well, it's a enchantment for all token creatures you control. So it doesn't get attached to a specific creature. It sits on the battlefield, and it gives creature tokens you control +1, and they have vigilance. So again, when they attack, they don't tap. And again, you're not surprised to see here, there's a full complement of these. Call of the Conclave, green and a white, puts a 3/3 green centaur creature token onto the battlefield. And there's a full complement of those. So that's going to give us a 3/3 green for a green and a white. But of course, with all the populate and pumping that's going on relative to tokens, that's going to be very, very useful. We've got a charm here, Selesnya charm, green and a white. So we get to choose with the charms, but only one thing. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains trample until end of turn. So that's going to be creature specific. We can exile a target creature with power 5 or greater, or we can put a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance onto the battlefield. So that last one, very synergistic with what we're trying to achieve here with tokens. And not surprisingly, because the utility of this card, there's 4 of those. So you have, in a nutshell, you have targeted pumping for a creature, removal for fatties or very large creatures, power 5 or greater, or the ability to put tokens onto the battlefield which have vigilance. Okay, Lingering Souls. So 2 and a white for this is a sorcery. Put 2 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield. So that's the first thing. The second thing you need to notice about this card, and you'll see in the mana base how this is resolved, is that this, we've been saying up to now, this is a green-white deck, but when I said that, I said there's something a bit different about this, or it's not straightforward. It's not straightforward green-white. The flashback on here, which is 1 and a black, has got black in it. So that has to happen is there has to be a black source somewhere in the deck, and you'll see how that works in a moment when we get to the mana base. So we could play this without a black mana card. Doesn't stop us casting this. Okay, so we play 2 and a white, and we get to put 2 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield. But without that black mana source, we don't get the benefit of effectively recasting this from the graveyard later when we've got 1 and a black to spend. So we get the same effect again with this. And there are 4 of those in here. Sorry, three of those. Rootborn Defences. 2 and a white for an instant. It's got populate on it, and also makes creatures that you control. So again, all creatures, not just tokens that you control, but all creatures you control have indestructible. And 3 of those. Parallel Lives. 3 and a green for an enchantment which, if an effect would put 1 or more tokens onto the battlefield under your control, it puts twice that many of those tokens onto the battlefield instead. So this is 3 and a white, so you're not going to be able to play this without some sort of mana ramping, which we'll see if there is any in the deck. You're not going to be able to play this until turn 4 or afterwards, and this is another one where timing is really critical. Now you'll notice there's only 1 copy of this in the deck, and that's deliberate, because you have to understand, often why are there 4 ofs, why are there 3 ofs, why are there 2 ofs, why are there only 1 ofs in a deck. Now in this case, it's 3 and a green, so it's 4 to cast, So one reason why there are a lower number of cards, a certain card in a deck, is because the casting cost may be high, so therefore you don't want copies clogging your hand up early in the game when you can't play it anyway. So that's one reason why there's often less of a particular card, is that you don't want to ensure that you've got it either early on in the game or in your opening hand, which by having 4 of in a deck would increase the probability. That's one reason why there might be less of something, is because the casting cost is high, and you want to try and bias the probability or force a hand of chance, so that it definitely is more likely to play later when you would have more mana free. The other reason is just specifically what this card does. You have to gauge that against the fact that it's saying if a token would put 1 or more tokens on the battlefield under your control, it puts twice that. So almost the reverse, it's working the opposite direction, where you're saying, well, actually you do want this card in as early as you can, so that it makes maximum effect. Because the later you put it into the game, the more chances you've already played tokens, and then this won't trigger. So it's only going to trigger on new tokens coming in. So it's one possible card where, as you play this deck, you might say, well, actually, I do want, I can't play it until turn 4 or onwards, but it's not appearing enough to make it worthwhile having in the deck. And do I want multiple copies of this at the expense of something else? Advent of the Worm. 1, 2 green and a white for an instant, puts a 5/5 green worm creature token with trample onto the battlefield. High cost creature. It's good to help you finish off an opponent. So not surprisingly, there's only one of these. Growing Ranks. 2 green white. So this is hybrid mana. If you've never seen hybrid mana before, what that means is you can choose to cast either green or white in that mana slot. So you could play 2 of any colour mana and a white and another white, or 2 a green and a green, or 2 and a green and a white, basically. At the beginning of your upkeep, populate. So it's another just straight populate spell. It's just one of those. You're not going to be able to play that until turn 4. Increasing Devotion. Oh, and yeah, notice with this, okay, in as opposed to another one which was just a single populate, this is a populate that keeps giving. So once it's in play, at the beginning of your upkeep, you populate. It's not a case of the earlier card which had just populate on it. That happened when you put the card into play. This thing, as long as it's in play, will just keep triggering populate at the beginning of the upkeep. 3 and 2 white for Increasing Devotion. It puts 5 1/1 white human creature tokens onto the battlefield. If Increasing Devotion was cast from a graveyard, put 10 of those tokens onto the battlefield instead. It's got a flashback cost of 7 and 2 white, so this is where it would get cast from the graveyard. So flashback allows you to cast it from the graveyard for that increased mana cost. So you get to reuse it, and when you do that, if it's coming in from the graveyard, you've cast it from there, then obviously the 10 tokens onto the battlefield clause kicks in. So 3 and 2 white. So that's the first part of the deck, and just a couple more things to remember when you're tweaking these decks. So when you play this, what you're looking for is how the amount of cards in the decks works well with the synergies that you're trying to trigger. So what I mean by that is, if you've got a small number of a particular card which is going to help with the populate ability, you don't want it coming in so late in the game that the game's over before you actually get a chance to play it, before that effect happens. So there's 2 things you can do. One is it coming into the game a lot later because you haven't got many of them, or are you unable to use it later because the casting cost is higher? So if the casting cost is higher, then what you'll have to do is look at ways of getting land out a lot quicker. Are you making your land drops every turn? Are there cards you can introduce to maybe increase those land drops or that ability of mana that you need to basically be able to cast that card a little bit earlier, or if it's just coming in late because you're not seeing it in your hand until later in the game because there's not many of them, do you need to increase them? And as you increase them, you know, that issue of mana being able to cast them early comes into play as well. So there's some very complicated decisions to make when you tweak this deck about, you know, what is working, why isn't it working, if I do something to make it work, but does it make any difference because the thing I'm doing won't trigger until something else happens. So this is one of the problems with decks that have real, you know, this has real good synergy, but in order for that synergy to work, something else, like with all synergies, something else has to be happening. You know, it's not, it's populate, it's token specific here. It's not a very broad synergy going on. There's, you know, it's the synergy is specific around tokens, and because we have a lot of tokens in the deck, it makes it a lot more effective, but you have to decide how effective is that. So moving on to our base, so we've got green white in here, so how is this being resolved? With the presence of our card that requires black mana to benefit the flashback and be able to cast that, how are we doing that? So first up, we've got some evolving wilds. We've actually got 4 of those. Now what they will allow you to do is you can, once you play them, you can tap them, sacrifice them, search your library for a basic land card. Remember, it's a basic land card on here, and you'll see why that's important in a moment, and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So this will let us hunt down, you know, maybe we've got stuck with all green or all white or the wrong combination of things, and we have an evolving wilds. We can go and get that card. Now remember, the card that it finds, the basic land, comes into play tapped. So it's basically slows things down a bit if you have to use this, but it does let you fix for that elusive mana. We've also, to help with this, we have a Godless Shrine. We have one of those, and this fixes for that, helps fix for the black mana that we need. So the Godless Shrine, there is only one of it. It's white and a black, or white or black, sorry. But on the downside, if you want to play this straight away and you don't want it tapped, so you want to be able to use the mana straight away, you do have to pay 2 life. Okay, it's a shock land. And the shock is that you've got to pay 2 life if you want it to come into the battlefield and you don't want it tapped when it enters. But that's one possible way of generating your black mana for that flashback cost. Grove of the Guardian generates colourless mana, but also effectively has a creature attack. It's not one of these what they call man lands as such, in that it doesn't turn into a creature like if you've ever played sort of Zendikar block. There was man lands in the Zendikar block. And with this one, for 3 green white, you tap it and tap 2 untapped creatures you control. You then sacrifice this and put an 8/8 green and white elemental creature token with vigilance onto the battlefield. So you've actually lost this card in doing that. And there's one of those. Then you have Selesnya Guildgate. So this is going to help generate green and white. It comes into battlefield tap, so it's going to slow stuff down a bit. And there are 4 of those. So that's going to help fix any green-white balance problems in your deck. Then we move on to our mana base. So we have a number of planes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 planes. Our lone swamp. Now don't forget, we can fetch out this swamp using our evolving wilds. So, you know, we're increasing the probability of being able to get this down by having 4 cards that can hunt this down. So there's much more sources of, you know, of the ability to get black mana than we think. Here we've got this, which can be hunted down because it's a basic land with those 4 evolving wilds. And also we can use that other card to generate black mana. There was a dual colour land in here we looked at a moment ago, and then we got our forests. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 forests. So that's our mana base. So we can see there, one, how we're going to solve a problem we could get where we've got too much green and not enough white, and also how we get that elusive black mana. And finally, for the pack, we have our sideboard. So our sideboard, like I said, with a sideboard, you build your sideboard generally with reference to the what's the word I'm looking for? With reference to the metagame. My mind went blank for the moment there. The metagame you're playing in. So the idea is that you can tweak your deck should you face certain challenges which the deck in its base format is not tuned best for, doesn't respond best to playing against that deck. Is what they call a bad matchup. What they've done here is giving you things that generally address weaknesses if you played against certain decks. So, for instance, we have a fog type effect with a populate stuck on it for 1 and a green, so it prevents all combat damage that would be dealt to you and populate. So you're playing with the tempo, you're messing with your opponent's damage making for 1 turn, which will basically give you a sort of breathing space. So that's what it's doing here, and that's to address certain things with this deck. In that you may find that it takes a little while for you to get the mana you need to do certain things. You may be holding certain cards back because you don't want to play them until the synergies work better. So therefore you actually might be taking damage at a certain point, and this might need to negate, say there was a very fast, aggressive deck that on 1 turn was going to do a particular lot of damage, and you weren't in a position to block that or deal with it, and you had one of these, you could just delay that for that turn. All their creatures will be tapped out, and then on the following turn you may be in a better position to respond. Or you may be doing that deliberately. You may be sort of enticing them in because you've got this, play the card, prevent all combat damage, they're tapped out if they've done, tapped all their creatures to attack you, and then you can just swing with an open, opponent's completely open. And there are 3 of those. If you're going up against a creature deck, fast creature deck, aggressive deck, you might find that the pacifism is needed in the deck to lock those creatures down, particularly anything. So enchanted creature can't attack or block on here, and there's 4 of those on there. You've got a Sundering Growth in the sideboard, so that's going to deal specifically with artifacts or enchantments, but also has populate attached to it to make it synergistic with your deck. And there are 3 of those. Got a Centaur Healer, so it's another sort of breathing space type card. So it's a 3/3 for 1 green white. The ability, which is the sort of stalling ability, when it enters the battlefield you gain 3 life. So it's going to bring your life back up again, allowing you to effectively absorb damage done straight to your face, because you're basically trying to build your board position before you do anything too serious. And so this would help if a deck is doing you damage which is preventing you getting in that position. Again, it's like stalling slightly. And there are 4 of those because of that. And then we have this Rogue's Passage, which is an interesting card. So you can tap this, add 1 to your mana pool. 4 colourless tap, target creature is unblockable this turn. So this would be useful if you were playing the deck against an opponent and you were finding that a particular large card, which would under normal circumstances be killing the opponent, is being blocked in some way or prevented from doing damage. This is going to get that damage through. There's 1 of these because it's the sort of effect you wouldn't want until later in the game, when you had sufficient large creatures so that for 4 colourless tap and they're unblockable, you're going to be in a position where the opponent's vulnerable to being killed by a single creature with a a large amount of power on it. Okay, so there's the deck. What I'm going to do in a moment is start cracking these packs so we can see have we got any useful green white cards which will be good in the deck. So now moving on to opening our Dragon's Maze boosters, we're going to be looking out for anything in green or white, anything that's going to help with the populate or with the creature token synergy that's going on, and anything that's going to help with our mana base. Maybe there might be some shock lands in here that could help, or that will be good to substitute out with our less aggressive mana fixing which we have here. So let's open these up, see what we've got. It also means that we can prove or disprove the fact that opening up boosters like this is a good way to modify an event deck. And of course there's always a chance we might crack something completely unrelated but very nice. So moving through our commons, we have Runner's Bane in blue, Vyashnu First Blade, red white, Mind Static is blue, Mutant's Play, so this is in green. So target creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it fights target creature an opponent controls. So we've got the fight thing on here. Not really necessarily synergistic with anything in our deck, but I'm just going to put this to one side because it is in green. Sunspire Gatekeepers, 3 and a white. When Sunspire Gatekeepers enter the battlefield, if you control 2 or more gates, put a 2/2 white knight creature token onto the battlefield. Now, from our mana base, we are controlling gates. So we have the Selesnya Guild Gate in here, the green-white one. On the downside, yes, we do have 4 of those in the deck, but the chances of actually having 4 in play are probably pretty slim. So yes, it's in the right colour, but not really going to work out for us, and certainly nothing synergistic with either tokens. Oh, and actually, sorry, no, my mistake. Yeah, what I mean to say is it's unlikely that the token part of this, which is the synergistic thing, will trigger because of the fact we need 2 or more gates. So it can trigger, but maybe too late to do anything. But anyway, there is a synergy there, but it's situational. We've got a clue stone, and these are always interesting to look at because these help generate or fix for mana. And that's in black green because it's Golgari. Murmuring Phantasm in blue. We've got another clue stone. We're probably going to see lots of clue stones. That's normally the case in this set. Gruul clue stone for red and green. We have a Maze Sentinel, which gives multicoloured creatures we control vigilance. And there are a few multicoloured creatures in the deck, and it's in white, so we'll just put that there. Pilfered Plans is in blue and black. Spike Jester, so we're now moving on to our uncommons. Black red. Blaze Commando is red white. Flux Charger, blue red. So let's see what our... So okay, so we have 5 white black for Teaser Envoy of Ghosts. 4/4 vigilance, protection from creatures. It's one of the sort of legendary creatures in this set because there was sort of one for each of the guilds. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, destroy that creature. Put a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying onto the battlefield. So yes, it does generate creature tokens, high mana cost. Although we have black mana floating around in our deck, there's would we want to put this in? Something, again, you'd have to try this in the deck. I don't think it would necessarily work very well for a number of reasons. One being, you are dependent on the black mana, whereas the other card that needed it in the deck you know, it wouldn't be the end of the world if you couldn't activate the flashback ability. With this, you can't cast it at all if you don't have black mana. And yeah, I don't really see how that's going to fit necessarily, but I'm going to put it in the pile, that pile anyway. We've got a Dimir Gilgate, which generates blue-black, and then a advert token. So what I'm going to try and do is just keep this sort of, you know, to look at pile in the same place and just keep adding to it. So that's the other thing actually to consider, you know, with our little bit of black mana, is there anything that we could use in black? Okay, Golgari Cluestone, black for black-green. Yep. You could use that as another way of generating black mana, but would we want it using up a slot? Yeah, probably not. Green and blue, Beetleform Mage, Bane Alley Blackguard, 1/3 for 1 and a black. A Dimir Cluestone, which generates blue or black. The other thing about these Cluestones, if you've not seen them before, they have a sort of, which is effectively a replacement thing on them. So you can, for a cost of blue and a black, and you can tap it, sacrifice it, and then draw a card. Tithe Drinker, white-black, it's got lifelink and extort. Maze Behemoth, so this is our maze creature from the set in green, so let's see if it would be useful to us. So it's 5 and a green for a 5/4, so obviously it's in green. Trample, multicoloured creatures you control have trample. Put it on the pile, but I don't see any immediate synergy in there. Another Maze Sentinel, which we had a look at earlier. Sinister Possession, that's a single black. Another maze creature in blue, Maze Glider. Haunter of the Night Veil, which is our first uncommon in this pack. Creatures you control get -1/-0 for blue-black. 3 blue-black. Unflinching Courage, so this is in green and white. 1 green-white, enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has trample and lifelink. So it will pump a creature, but it doesn't really interact with tokens specifically in any advantageous way, although you can put it on a creature token, and it doesn't really, well, it doesn't at all work with the populate mechanic, but as it's in green and white, I will put it on the pile. Okay, Turn and Burn, so this is a split card here. Okay, Tajik Blade of the Legion, so another legendary creature. Red and white this is, so Tajik Blade of the Legion is indestructible battalion. Whenever Tajik and at least 2 other creatures attack, Tajik gets +5/+5 until end of turn. Obviously that's more at home in a battalion deck, and it's in the wrong colour. So we've got a nice full Advent of the Worm. So yes, we've got one of these in the deck, so if you wanted to bling up your deck, yeah, that would look cool. Also nice if, you know, maybe you like a nice blingy EDH and you have a green-white EDH deck that uses Advent of the Worm. And maybe have an EDH tokens deck. Put a 5/5 green worm creature token with trample onto the battlefield. So that's definitely going in our useful pile. Then we have a Selesnya Gilgate. So we've got a play set of these already, so we can't add any more, but we'll put that in the pile. And we have a white-black spirit token. So pop that there. Okay, moving on to our next pack. Maybe we'll be able to pull another legendary creature. Is it Cluestone? So that's Cluestone for blue and or red. Mutant's Prey. Okay, so this we've seen. This had fight on it. Steeple Rock, flying first strike. No synergies there with our deck, but it does have flying, so it has evasion. Riot Piker, Boros Cluestone, red white. Rakdos Drake is in black. It's got flying and unleash on it. Punish the enemy. So this is damage to target player and creature to a cost of 3 for 4 and a red. Thrashing Moss Dog, it's got reach and scavenge on it. 3 and a green, so we can block creatures with flying. Let's have a look at the scavenge ability, see if there's any synergy with populate, probably not. So 4, 2 green, exile this card from your graveyard. Put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to this card's power on target creature. So 3/3, sticking on. See, this is the thing. You know, the populate mechanic populates tokens. This card, which puts counters on, is more at home with decks which increase the number. Did I say counters? I meant to say populate increases the number of tokens, creature tokens. Sorry. Yeah, populate increases the number of creature tokens. There are other abilities out there which will, or other mechanics, which will increase counters. And this would be more at home in a deck that does that. But because it's green, I'm going to just put it in the pile, keep them together. Fatal Fumes in black. Feral Animist, red-green, uncommon. Woodlock Crawler, blue-black. Turn and Burn, another Advent of the Worm. So if I wanted to increase my Advents of the Worm in the deck, I could do that. Whether or not there would be any advantage in doing that, you know, you'd have to play the deck first and see, well, did I need an Advent of the Worm in the deck when I didn't have one. Dimir Cluestone, so we got a foil of that. And a Dimir Guildgate, black, and a Centaur token. So if we're putting Centaur tokens into the battlefield, there we have a nice card that we can use rather than maybe a bit of paper with just the word Centaur written across it 3/3. So put that in there in case there was any. I can't remember off the top of my head if there was any Centaur token requirements in there. And let's lastly moving on to the booster. Okay, so we've got a Riot Piker, Boros Cluestone, Rakdos Drake, Runner's Bane, Vyashnu First Blade, Mind Static, Battering Krasis. It is in green, so it's going to go on our pile just to flick through to look through later, but it does have Evolve on it. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, that creature has greater power or toughness than this creature, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So it's not going to have necessary synergy with this deck, and again this would be better placed with a deck that plays around with counters, as one of the cards we've already got in here does. But because it's in green, it's going to add it to our pile. Morg Burst, black red, Maze Sentinel, another one. Ascended Law Mage, so moving on to our uncommons. Another Turn and Burn. A Blast of Genius in blue red. So let's see what we have. So we have our rare slot is Catch and Release. So on the catch side, sorcery, gain control of target permanent until end of turn. Untap it, it gains haste until end of turn. And so the other side is each player sacrifices an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, a land, and a planeswalker. Okay, but not in green or white together. There's a white in there, but that's about the only colour that's similar. Everything else is not features in our deck, so not a lot of use for that. We've got a foil Orzhov Guildgate here, so that'll come into battlefield tapped to generate white or black. And a Golgari Guildgate, black or green. So those, those gill gates here, just as an example, so the Orzhov and the Golgari, they don't really trump anything that's in our mana base. What I mean by that is we have that land. Let me just try and find it so I can show you what I'm talking about. We've got Godless Shrine in the deck, okay, just so you can compare that. So there's our Godless Shrine that actually is in the deck. So this generates white or black, but we have a choice here. We can let it come into play and take 2 life, or we can have it come into play tapped. So if you compare that with the Orzhov Gilgate, which is in the same colours, so this one just basically comes into the battlefield tapped. So there's no choice on it. So this is going to be the stronger card. The only way this might be of an advantage to us is, say we wanted to increase up our possibility of basically generating black mana for whatever reason, and we wanted to do it through the ability to have a choice. We could use this, in that we can choose to have either white or black, but again it would slow the mana down. Okay, so just flicking back through here, the way I see it is actually, this gives an example where this is not a good way to actually modify a deck. We've got a lot of good white or green stuff. So I'm just going to pull out, let me just do the Gilgate there, Flinching Courage, not really. Yeah. Now I don't really see anything in here that's necessarily going to trump anything that's already in the deck. If you were going to go off at a tangent with this and start splashing more black for whatever reason, and I can't really see, it's going to dilute down the populate and the creature tokens, although this does, you might want to go in this direction, but I'm not, not saying that's what you should do, but sometimes it's nice to play around with a few things and just see if they work, but I don't think so. The other card which had mentioned tokens on it was the Sunspire Gatekeeper. This is a tricky one because you've got to have 2 or more gates. You only have 4 in the deck in total, so the probability of that happening is pretty low. Then we've got these copies of Advent of the Worm. So if we wanted to increase more, put in more Advent of the Worm, we could. There, and we have this Selesnya Gilgate, but like I said, that we've already got a full complement of those. So although we pulled some nice cards, nothing really relevant necessarily to the event deck. Like I said, not the best way to do this, so be very careful if you do that impulse buy where you buy the event deck, buy the boosters. If you are going to do it, get the event deck first, have a play around with it, and if you do want to just buy boosters because they're fun to open, try and pick a set that one is you're going to start a better chance of getting cards that are going to be useful in the deck, and 2 isn't going to rotate out. What I mean by that is, supposing you go into the shop, and we've bought boosters from Dragon's Maze. Okay, so this is the most recent set. So every October, Magic goes through what's called rotation. So there's a format called Standard, and Standard has in it a certain number of sets. At the moment, what's in it is the Innistrad block, which we Innistrad Dark Ascension, Avacyn Restored, the 2013 core set, and all 3 sets from the Return to Ravnica block. So that's Return to Ravnica, Gatecrash, and Dragon's Maze. Now in October, what will happen is when the next expansion set comes out, the 2013 will rotate out from Standard, and Standard is a particular format that people play, will rotate out from Standard, as will the whole of the Innistrad block. So you'll be left with The four sets from Return to Ravnica, Gatecrash, and Dragon's Maze, plus the new core set, which is actually coming out in a couple of weeks' time, which is M14, plus the first set of the next expansion block, basically. So the thing is, with any card you buy, if you're going to be playing standard, they do have a sort of shelf life on them, and it's important to be aware of that. And as you saw in this event deck, there were certain cards which were from a lot earlier sets. I think there was one in here. Well, there's certainly one from M13, so Evolving Wilds, if it isn't in the next core set, would rotate out, and you'd have to replace those with something else that would work. And things like Parallel Lives, which is in Innistrad, that would rotate out in October, and again you'd have to find a replacement for that in this deck. So that's something to bear in mind when you're buying any Magic cards you want to play in standard, is, you know, what's the shelf life on the cards? How long before these cards are no longer standard legal? But if you're not playing standard, or you're just playing casually, it doesn't matter. But again, it's just something to think about. So just, all I'm saying is, like, buy wisely when you're doing this, because it is a major investment for a lot of people, and it can easily get out of control. Anyway, there you have it. So that's the complete video on Dragon's Maze. So we had the first bit where we looked at the Dragon's Maze event deck, and then the second bit where we cracked open some Dragon's Maze boosters to see if anything was useful, and sadly not really, but I sort of half expected that. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye for now.